When you think of the Huns, images of Attila, that fearsome force sweeping across ancient Europe probably come to mind.
Mm-hmm.
But beyond the legend, there's always been this profound mystery. Where did they truly come from? What language did they actually speak?
Yeah.
What if I told you that their origins and a surprising connection to another powerful yet, mysterious inner Asian group, the Xiōng-nú, are far more complex and, well, fascinating than we traditionally believed?
Well, today we're embarking on a deep dive into some really groundbreaking new linguistic research.
Okay.
This study, led by Dr. Svenja Bonmann and Dr. Simon Fries, uses language itself as this incredible forensic tool, like a detective almost, sifting through ancient clues to uncover these hidden histories.
It's a truly remarkable historical puzzle, you see, because both the Huns and the Xiōng-nú left very few written records.
Not in their own languages anyway.
Exactly. And this absence has fueled, well, centuries of debate about their true ethnic roots, their linguistic roots,
Yeah.
with theories often pointing towards Turkic or Mongolic, maybe even Iranian origins.
So our mission for you today is to really unpack how a meticulous look at ancient words and names and even the places they lived has helped solve this long-standing mystery.
Okay, so how does this new research change things?
Well, it connects the Huns and the Xiōng-nú not to those Turkic-speaking groups like we often assumed, but actually to ancient Siberian roots.
Siberian.
Yeah, specifically a language called Old Arin, which is part of the Yeniseian language family. So get ready for some surprising facts that will genuinely make you rethink everything you thought you knew about these legendary empires.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So to really get this breakthrough, let's maybe set the historical scene first. Who were the Xiōng-nú exactly?
Right. So the Xiōng-nú were basically a loose tribal confederation. They really dominated Inner Asia for a long time, from about the 3rd century BCE up to the 2nd century CE.
And wasn't there a recent discovery? Something about their capital?
Yeah, just a few years back, archaeologists found a city in Mongolia they strongly believe is Longcheng, the Xiōng-nú capital. Pretty major find.
Okay, so that's the Xiōng-nú. Then we have the Huns.
And the Huns, yeah. We know them mostly for their kind of meteoric rise in southeastern Europe. That's 4th to 5th century CE. They built this powerful multi-ethnic empire. Didn't last super long, relatively speaking, but it was impactful.
Right. And we generally accept they came from Inner Asia.
Yes, that part's pretty much consensus among historians. But their precise ethnic identity, and especially their language, that's been the big debate.
Because no Hunnish documents, basically.
Exactly. Almost everything we know, particularly about the Xiōng-nú, comes from outsiders, like ancient Chinese chronicles.
Which leads us to that theory that's been around forever, the idea that both groups spoke a Turkic language.
And that idea mostly comes from the later westward expansion of Turkic peoples, which really got going around the 7th century CE.
But the timing's off.
That's what this new research really points out. Bonmann and Fry show this big Turkic expansion happened long after the Xiōng-nú and the Huns had already made their first moves west.
So the earliest solid evidence for Turkic words
is only from the 7th century AD. It means there's just no strong evidence for a big Turkic or even Mongolic presence during the main Xiōng-nú era, 3rd century BCE to 2nd CE.
Okay, that's a huge timeline shift. What about the Iranian connection some people proposed?
Well, an Iranian component in the Xiōng-nú Empire is definitely possible, maybe even likely. But the evidence doesn't really suggest an Iranian language was spoken by the ruling dynasty itself. This study helps kind of qualify those earlier ideas.
Got it. So this leads us to the big reveal.
The core revelation, yeah. That the ethnic core, the sort of central group of both the Xiōng-nú and the European Huns, and this includes Attila's own ruling dynasty, they shared a common language.
And that language is?
An early form of Arin, part of the Yeniseian language family.
Yeniseian. Okay. What exactly are those? Paleo-Siberian, you said.
Exactly. Paleo-Siberian languages. They were spoken in Siberia way back, before the big influxes of Uralic, Turkic, and Tungusic groups that came later.
And some people still speak a related language today.
Amazingly, yes. A very small group along the Yenisei River in Russia still speaks Ket, which is a Yeniseian language.
Wow. Okay, so how did Bonmann and Fries figure this out? You mentioned 4 pillars of evidence.
Yes, and what's really compelling is the rigorous scientific approach. They looked at linguistic data from 4 totally independent domains.
Okay.
And like you said, maybe individually, each piece might seem small, maybe just suggestive, but when you put them all together,
it builds a really strong case.
An undeniable picture, really. Like putting together puzzle pieces separately, they hint, together they show the whole thing.
All right, let's break down those 4 pillars. What's the first one?
Okay, pillar 1, ancient loanwords. These are words borrowed into other languages, specifically Turkic and Mongolic.
Ah, the linguistic detective work, finding words that don't quite fit the pattern.
Exactly. Linguists spot these loanwords because they have sounds or structures that aren't native to the borrowing language. They stick out.
So what did they find in Turkic and Mongolic?
Something pretty profound. The study identified 5 key words in Proto-Turkic and Proto-Mongolic. These are the earliest reconstructible forms of those language families.
Okay.
And these 5 words are actually borrowings from an early Yeniseian language.
What kind of words are we talking about?
Words like lake, rain, lizard, or maybe frog, silver, and birch.
Huh. Those sound pretty fundamental, especially for that region.
They really are. These aren't just random words. They're core terms tied to Siberian geography, geology, plants, animals. They reflect deep cultural connections.
And the timing is important here too, right?
Crucial. These words entered Proto-Turkic and Proto-Mongolic before those language families split into the languages we know today. That proves the contact was ancient, really ancient.
Now, how do they know it was Arin, specifically, not just any Yeniseian language?
Ah, that's the clincher. These specific words, when they appear in Turkic and Mongolic, they show a word initial K sound, like cool for lake water. That initial K sound is characteristic of Arin for these words. But other Yeniseian languages don't have it for these particular words. They might have something else, or no initial consonant.
So that K sound is like a fingerprint pointing straight to Old Arin.
Unambiguously. It points directly to Old Arin as the source language. And this also suggests something else.
What's that?
It suggests Old Arin was probably a language of high status, a prestigious language in Inner Asia back then, influential enough for others to borrow its words.
Makes sense if it was the language of a powerful group like the Xiōng-nú.
Precisely. The fact that Proto-Turkic and Proto-Mongolic borrowed these words with that distinctive Arin K tells us that sound change had already happened in Arin before the borrowing took place. It's like a linguistic timestamp.
Okay, that's pillar 1, the loanwords. What's the second piece of evidence?
Pillar 2 gives us a direct, albeit tiny, glimpse into the Xiōng-nú language itself. It's something called the Jie couplet.
A couplet, like a little poem.
Sort of. It's a short passage, just 2 lines, preserved in a 7th century Chinese chronicle. And it's considered basically the only direct textual evidence we have of the actual Xiōng-nú language.
Wow, just that. That's incredible. So what does it tell us?
Well, what's remarkable is that for a long time, people tried to interpret it as Turkic.
Fitting the old theory.
Exactly. But more recent, rigorous research has pretty much disproven that Turkic interpretation.
So how does Arin fit in?
The couplets features both its phonetics, how it likely sounded based on the Chinese characters used to write it, and its morphology, its grammar line up much better with Arin.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Take the grapheme, the written character K, used for the word army. Many Yeniseian languages tend to use an A vowel sound for army. But Arin uses an E sound.
And that matches the Chinese record.
It's a precise phonetic match. Seems like a tiny detail, but it's like a fingerprint. And there's also a specific verbal ending in the couplet, ek, meaning something like, they did X. That specific ending. Grammatically, it's found only in Arin among the relevant related languages, not in the others, not in Turkic. It's another strong pointer.
So it's not just one thing, it's these little details adding up.
Exactly. And it's not just the couplet either. There's the Xiōng-nú title, Ingri Kuala. It means son of heaven.
Right.
That second part, Kuala, meaning son, looks very similar to the Arin word for son, which is something like a kale or bike hole. Again, a strong resemblance.
Any others?
Even the Xiōng-nú word for milk. The way it's recorded suggests it started with a voiceless P sound. That fits Arin, whereas another related Yeniseian language, Punpokal, has a voiced D sound there.
These subtle phonetic differences are really key then.
They're like tiny molecular markers, helping linguists trace the real linguistic family tree.
Okay, loanwords and the GA couplet. That brings us to pillar 3.
Pillar 3. Hunnish personal names. This is called anthroponymy, the study of personal names.
Right, because we have almost no Hunnish texts, so names are crucial.
Extremely crucial. Now, the Hunnish Empire was definitely multi-ethnic, lots of different groups involved. But the core, the leadership, likely came from those Xiōng-nú descendants moving west.
And this is where Attila's name comes in again, right? I remember you mentioned a new interpretation.
Yes. This is where it gets really interesting. Most people have heard the common idea that Attila is a Germanic nickname, little father, from Gothic Ada, father, plus Ila, diminutive suffix.
Makes sense on the surface.
It does. But this new research proposes a compelling Yeniseian alternative. Bonmann and Fry show how Attila could come from an old Arin-emphasized adjective, Attila.
Attila, what does that mean?
It means something like quick-ish or quite quick.
Huh, how did they get that?
Well, Arin has a two-syllable root word, Attila, meaning quick.
Okay.
And Yeniseian, the ancestor language, had this common suffix la, which acted as an emphasizer, a bit like adding ish in English, like longish or greenish, but maybe more like rather or quite. So Attila is quite quick.
What about the double T in Attila, A-T-T-I-L-A?
Good question. That could be due to something called folk etymology. That's where people hear a foreign word and adapt its spelling or pronunciation to make it sound like a word they already know, in this case, maybe influenced by the Germanic atta.
Ah, so the Germanic connection isn't totally wrong, just maybe influencing the spelling.
Possibly. Or it could simply be how the Greeks, who wrote down many of these names, recorded it. Ancient Greek didn't always clearly distinguish between single and double consonants, what linguists call geminate consonants.
So quick-ish or quite quick, that sounds, well, pretty fitting for a leader like Attila, known for swish campaigns.
Doesn't it? It feels like a very powerful epithet for a renowned, fast-moving leader. Much better fit, maybe, than Little Father.
And it's not just Attila's name.
No, the study also looks at other names from Attila's dynasty, specifically two names recorded as Erjal, and Asajal.
Okay, what's special about them?
The second part of both names, Rijal. Surprisingly, this element corresponds really well to the Arin word for wife, which is quam.
Wife? Really? How is that unique to Arin?
Well, other Yeniseian languages use different vowel sounds for their word for wife or woman. Arin specifically has that A vowel in quam, which matches the zal ending.
Okay, so if a rail relates to wife, what could those names mean?
Let's break them down. Erfil could potentially mean something like being a lively woman. This connects to the old Arin word ero, meaning alive.
Lively woman, okay. And Erdal.
Erjil could mean being a heavenly wife or godly wife. This connects to the Arin word air, meaning sky or god.
So, wait, if these names contain an element meaning wife, does that mean?
Exactly. This linguistic analysis strongly suggests that Erjil was actually a female name.
But wasn't Erdal traditionally thought to be a man? Like Attila's father-in-law or something?
That was a common assumption, yes. But based on this linguistic evidence, a female interpretation makes much more sense. It might refer to Attila's wife, or perhaps her mother. And interestingly, this mirrors a modern title in the related Ket language, Eskim, which means goddess or god's wife. It fits the pattern.
That completely flips the script on who Erdal might have been. Amazing what digging into the names can reveal. Okay, that's pillar 3. What's the fourth and final pillar?
The fourth pillar is ancient migration paths, traced through place names and especially water names. This is toponymy and hydronymy.
Like reading the landscape itself for linguistic clues.
Precisely. The names people give to places, rivers, lakes, they stick around for a long time and can tell us about the languages spoken there in the past and how people moved.
So what did they find?
First, they looked at the widespread presence across Inner Asia of place names containing an element like Gekul or Kol or Ekkol. These typically mean water or lake.
And people usually attribute those to Turkic languages, right? Like Gotkol, Blue Lake.
Often, yes, attributed to the later Turkic expansion. But here's the thing. These forms, the Kol form, perfectly match the old Arin word Kol for water.
The same word that was borrowed into Proto-Turkic.
The very same one. And the geographical distribution of these Kol names extends quite far south of the Altai-Sayan Mountains. This strongly suggests a pretty widespread territory where Arin was spoken, or at least dominant.
Potentially matching the Xiōng-nú's area of influence.
It aligns very well, potentially. But then they look at a second set of water names, hydronyms, based on the Yeniseian word for river.
Okay, how does that help trace migration?
Because the word for river varies slightly across different Yeniseian languages, particularly in its consonants. You can tell which branch of Yeniseian likely left that name behind based on those variations.
Like dialect differences almost, frozen in place names?
Kind of, yeah. For instance, an initial ez sound combined with the final tai sound in the river word points specifically to Arin. Other combinations point to other branches.
So they mapped where these Arin-specific river names are found.
Exactly. And when you map the geographical distribution of these specifically Arin river names, you see a clear westward pattern, a migration path leading out from the Altai-Sayan region, heading west.
Westward. From the Altai-Syan. Wait a minute.
Yes.
Doesn't that exactly match the known migration route of the Huns as they move towards Europe?
It matches perfectly. The linguistic map derived from these Arin place names mirrors the historical trajectory of the Huns.
Wow. That's incredibly powerful evidence.
It really is. It strongly supports the idea that these Arin speakers were the Huns, or at least the core group leading the migration, and that their ethnic language was indeed Old Arin.
So if we pull it all together now,
Yeah.
all four pillars.
Right. You have the ancient loanwords in Turkic Mongolic pointing to Arin's early prestige. You have the Ga couplet and other Xiōng-nú words fitting Arin phonetics and grammar. You have Hunnish royal names, including Attila's, making sense as Arin words, even revealing a female identity for Araral. And now you have place names tracing an Arin migration path that matches the Huns movement.
Each piece points in the same direction.
Exactly. They all converge on the same conclusion, mutually reinforcing each other, like you said earlier, suggestive on their own, but taken together. Pretty conclusive.
And does this line up with other fields like genetics or archaeology?
It really does. What's compelling is that these linguistic findings align remarkably well with recent genetic studies.
Oh, what have they found?
Genetic research has also shown direct lineage links between the elite groups of the Yanyan and at least some of the European Huns. The archaeology points to cultural continuity, too. So the language, the genes, the artifacts, they're all starting to tell a much more consistent story.
It really underscores the power of this kind of linguistic work, comparative philology, doesn't it? Especially for understanding regions like Inner Asia, where written history from the groups themselves is so scarce.
Absolutely. Language, alongside genetics and archaeology, becomes a crucial tool for reconstructing these deep histories.
So this deep dive has really brought us to a genuine aha moment, I think.
Definitely.
The fierce European Huns, who we often just mentally filed under maybe Turkic, actually seem to have spoken an ancient Paleo-Siberian language, Old Arin.
And they shared those linguistic roots directly with their ancestors, the powerful but equally mysterious Xiōng-nú.
It fundamentally changes how we should think about those ancient migrations, the cultural exchanges happening across Eurasia. It really complicates, in a good way, the tapestry of human linguistic evolution.
It really does. It shows how languages themselves are like living archives, carrying these deep historical memories, just waiting for careful research to unlock them.
Which definitely raises a big question for you, listening right now. What other hidden histories might be waiting to be unveiled, just sitting there in the words we still use or the names on the maps around us?
Yeah, what other assumptions do we hold about ancient peoples, about connections between groups, that a really deep dive into language might completely overturn? It makes you wonder.